into an exclusive club or skipping a line at the airport.
Right.
This VIP card lets you own vast, sprawling tracts of land. And you get to collect taxes from every single person living and working on that dirt. And in return, you pay absolutely zero to the government.
Wow. Zero.
Nothing. You are effectively the lord of your own untaxed fiefdom, backed by, generations of tradition and legal paperwork.
Yeah, that's a pretty sweet deal.
Right. But now, imagine waking up one morning and the government has just legally obliterated that VIP card overnight.
It's a pretty staggering scenario to put yourself into. I mean, you go to sleep as this untouchable nobility, and you wake up as just another taxpayer.
Exactly.
And the instrument of that destruction, it wasn't, an army marching through the streets or some violent revolution. It was literally just ink on paper.
That's exactly what happened in Nepal in 1959. We are looking at a document today called the Birta Abolition Act.
Yeah.
And honestly, it is an absolute masterclass in how a state legally dismantles a deeply entrenched feudal empire.
It really is.
So for anyone listening with us on this deep dive who is fascinated by economics or law or just how structural wealth redistribution actually works in practice,
Yeah.
this is like the ultimate blueprint.
Yeah, and our core objective here is to really deconstruct those mechanics. Because when you look closely at this legislation, it isn't just some crude land grab.
Right. It's not just give us your stuff.
No, not at all. It is an incredibly sophisticated surgical operation. The state had to figure out how to turn these untaxed private fiefdoms into a reliable stream of state revenue without accidentally collapsing their entire national economy.
Or triggering an immediate civil war.
Exactly. Or a civil war.
Okay, so let's unpack the starting point.
Yeah.
Because before a government can outlaw a sprawling feudal system, they have to, define what they're actually attacking.
Right. The definitions are everything.
And the act starts off with a preamble that honestly doesn't read like dry legal code. It explicitly states its goals, like establishing equality among the people, improving the economic condition of the masses, and ending the feudal system of holding land without paying state taxes.
Yeah, and by putting that right at the top, the state is immediately seizing the moral high ground.
Oh, for sure.
They are framing this not as a seizure of private property, but as a modernization of the nation for the good of everyone. It sets this philosophical stage, but then obviously they have to get down to the actual legal definitions. They had to define this concept of Birta.
Right, and the way they define it is fascinating. Birta is essentially any land where state revenue, which they call malpad, is either fully exempted or significantly reduced compared to standard taxable land.
Which they call Raykar.
Yes, Raykar. And I want to pause on those terms for a second because they're kind of the foundation of everything we're going to talk about today.
Definitely.
So malpad is the tax you owe the state, and Raykar is normal taxable land. So Birta is the loophole, that VIP card I mentioned.
That is a great way to look at it. But the architects of this law realized they couldn't just treat all Birta land the exact same way.
Right.
So they created this highly calculated split between what they called A-class Birta and B-class Birta.
Okay, lay that out for us.
So A-class land is defined as land where the owner merely collects the assigned tax or revenue. They don't farm it. They haven't invested in cultivating it. They literally just sit back and collect.
Just totally passive.
Completely passive. And this also included uncultivated lands and massive private forests.
Okay, so the A-class owners are basically private tax collectors skimming off the top of the labor of tenant farmers.
Yes, entirely passive income. B-class Birta, on the other hand, is basically everything else. Meaning it's land where the owner actually has active land rights. Maybe they are managing the farming operations and they generate income from it directly as an active landlord.
Okay, I'm looking at this A-class versus B-class split, and it initially seems a little backward to me.
How so?
Well, if you're trying to destroy a feudal aristocracy, aren't they all just lords hoarding wealth? Why go through the exhausting legal effort of separating the passive tax collectors from the active landlords?
Because treating them the same would have caused massive logistical chaos. I mean, the state recognized that the passive A-class owners were fundamentally a useless middle layer.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, they were extracting wealth from the peasantry, but contributing absolutely nothing to the land's actual productivity. The B-class owners, however, were actually functioning cogs in the agricultural economy.
They were actually doing something.
Exactly. The state didn't want to destroy agriculture, They just wanted their cut of the profits.
That makes total sense, but it brings up a huge hurdle. These families, they hold all the wealth, and they hold the paper deeds.
Yeah.
And those deeds have probably been respected for, what, centuries. You can't just send a letter saying, please hand over your ancestral lands. How does a government practically enforce the end of a legal reality?
Well, that's the trick. They don't enforce a transition, they simply legislate a new reality into existence.
Just like that.
Just like that. The language in the legislation is completely uncompromising. It declares that all previous laws, all previous documents, and all ownership rights related to Birta are instantly canceled and voided.
Wow.
Yeah, with one sweeping clause, the state asserts that all Birta land is instantly converted to Raikar taxable state land.
It's like cutting the transmission in a car. They didn't destroy the engine of the economy. They just severed the mechanical link between the old lords and the land and connected the tenant farmers directly to the state.
That's a really good analogy.
But the sheer legal force of nullifying centuries of paperwork overnight, I mean, that is breathtaking. But
Yeah.
that instantly creates a massive logistical vacuum, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If you wipe the slate clean, how does the government sort out who actually owns the dirt the next morning?
And this is exactly where that A-class and B-class distinction becomes critical. Because they voided the old system, they basically had a blank slate to write the new rules of ownership.
Okay.
So for A-class land, the land gets registered directly in the name of the tenant.
Wait, really?
Yes, the actual person who has been sweating over the soil, giving all their profits to a passive lord, suddenly becomes the outright owner of the land they work.
Think about the psychological impact of that.
It's huge.
You just gave the most valuable asset in an agrarian society to the working masses.
It is a massive political victory. You instantly win the unshakable loyalty of the peasantry. Furthermore, any of those massive uncultivated lands or forests that were hoarded by A-class owners, those revert directly to the government. So the state gains massive natural resources and the peasants gain their farms.
Okay, but wait, what about the B-class landlords? If the A-class guys lose everything to the tenants or the government, do the active B-class landlords just get to keep their land?
Yep.
That seems like they're getting a much better deal.
It looks that way on the surface, but the state wasn't doing them a favor. They were converting them into the new sustainable tax base.
Oh, I see.
The B-class land remains registered to the Birta owner, meaning they don't lose the deed itself, but they completely lose their tax-exempt status. Suddenly, they're on the hook to pay taxes, just like everybody else.
And this is where the mechanics of that tax get incredibly granular.
Yes, very.
The Act outlines this massive tax matrix specifically targeting B-class land in the Kathmandu Valley, and it is based entirely on the exact quality of the dirt.
The Kathmandu tax matrix is just a brilliant piece of state administration. They didn't just slap a flat tax on every acre.
Which would be easier.
Much easier, but instead they categorized the land into 4 distinct grades based on agricultural potential.
Okay, break those down.
So you have Abal, which is the highest grade, the most fertile soil. That gets taxed at 3 rupees per ropani, a ropani being their traditional unit of land measurement.
Right.
Then it steps down to Dwayam, then Sim, and finally Chahar, which is the lowest grade, like the rockiest land, where the tax drops down to literal pennies per ropani.
I'm trying to visualize this.
Yeah.
You have, government assessors having to physically walk the Kathmandu Valley, evaluating soil moisture and crop yields, arguing with former feudal lords about whether a patch of dirt is Dwayam or Sim.
Yeah, a total boots-on-the-ground operation.
That sounds like an administrative nightmare. Why go to all that trouble? Why not just say, every ropani costs 1 rupee and save yourself the headache?
Because a flat tax is terrible state building.
How so?
Well, if you tax the rocky, barren Chahar land at the same flat rate as the lush Abal land, the landlord with the rocky soil mathematically cannot produce enough crops to pay the tax.
They just go under.
Exactly. He defaults, the land goes abandoned, the state gets no money, and the overall agricultural output drops.
Wow, okay.
By meticulously categorizing the soil, the state ensures a mathematically sound, sustainable revenue stream. They tied the paper tax directly to the physical reality of the earth.
So they are guaranteeing that the tax is painful for the wealthy lords, but actually payable.
Price.
It's calculated extraction. But this brings up the elephant in the room.
Which is?
Math is great, matrices are great, but these lords are used to absolute authority. Setting these tax rates inside a government building is one thing. How do you force a deeply entrenched aristocracy to actually reveal their hidden holdings and submit to these new rules?
You need a highly coercive mechanism.
A stick.
A very big stick. The architects of the Act mandated that B-class owners had to register their land with full, exhaustive details within exactly 120 days of the law taking effect.
A 120-day countdown timer for a massive mandatory financial audit. That is fast.
And the required details were staggering. They had to provide the total area, the exact physical borders, the names of all their tenants, the historical revenue they used to collect literally everything.
So they were forcing the lords to build the very database the government would use to tax them.
Exactly.
But if I'm a wealthy lord, my first instinct is to lie. Or just, ignore the deadline entirely.
Which is why the penalties were engineered to be terrifying for that era. If a landowner failed to register or knowingly submitted false information, they faced a 1,000 rupee fine, up to 1 year in jail, or both.
A year in jail is a heavy threat, but, wealthy elites historically have armies of lawyers. They can tie up government mandates in court for decades. They'd just be like, oh, I'll pay the fine, but first let's spend 10 years litigating the definition of my property border.
And that is the exact trap the government anticipated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to prevent the reform from dying in endless litigation, they didn't use the traditional courts to enforce this. The local mal office, which is the government revenue office, was granted the judicial authority of a court of law.
Wait, they gave tax collectors the power of a judge.
They had to. The head of the mal office could summon witnesses, demand financial documents, and issue immediate judgments.
That's intense.
It gets better. If a former lord decided to ignore a summons, the tax officer didn't have to petition a judge for a warrant. The tax officer could fine them 500 rupees on the spot just for not showing up.
Unbelievable.
By bypassing the sluggish traditional courts, they gave the tax collectors the summary judgment powers required to force immediate compliance.
That is ruthless efficiency. You strip away their legal shield and leave them staring down a tax collector who can literally throw them in a cell.
Yep, it left them with no way out.
Although, reading through the text, there is one massive group that manages to escape this dragnet entirely.
Yes.
The state carved out an explicit exemption for Guthi lands. These were religious or trust lands. As long as they were managed by the government, they were exempt from the new taxes and the land seizures.
It's a perfect example of political pragmatism. You pick your battles carefully when you are restructuring a society.
You can't fight everyone at once.
Exactly. Taking on the secular feudal lords was dangerous enough. Trying to disrupt ancient religious trusts and seize temple lands. That is how you turn a grumbling aristocracy into a holy war.
Right.
Exempting the Guthi lands was a strategic compromise to maintain cultural stability while they dismantled the secular economy.
Okay, so they avoided fighting the religious institutions.
Yeah.
But they still cornered the secular nobility. They seized the wealth of the A-class lords, they heavily taxed the B-class lords, and they backed it all up with taxmen threatening jail time.
A lot of pressure.
So much pressure. And history shows us that when you back a wealthy, powerful demographic into a corner and take away their livelihoods, they usually finance a civil war.
Yes, they do.
How did the state survive the inevitable backlash from the A-class lords who just lost everything to their tenants?
That is the most dangerous variable in this entire equation. You cannot corner a demographic that holds that much historical power without leaving them a very specific kind of exit.
Like a pressure release valve.
Exactly. They needed a pressure release valve to prevent total chaos. And the mechanism the state designed was a highly calculated financial buyout.
The compensation schedule.
Precisely. The government engineered a compensation plan for the displaced A-class owners based on the revenue they used to collect.
Right.
But they knew they couldn't afford a flat one-to-one reimbursement, and a flat payout wouldn't solve the political problem anyway. So they created a sliding scale of compensation that is just a masterclass in psychological warfare and social engineering.
Let's look at the math on this because it is fascinating.
It really is.
The schedule dictates that for the first 500 rupees of lost revenue, the landowner gets 1,000% compensation, 10 times what they lost.
Incredible, right?
But then, for the next 500 rupees of lost revenue, they only get 500% compensation. For the next 2,000 rupees, it drops down to 100%. The next 3,000 rupees gets 50%. And for any lost revenue above 4,000 rupees, they only receive 25% in compensation.
And we must mention the ultimate ceiling on this.
Right. The absolute maximum compensation anyone can receive, no matter how vast their empire was, is strictly capped at 12,000 rupees.
Not a penny more.
When I first read this, I thought of it like an inverse tax racket. But it's doing something much more aggressive than just saving the government money, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It is designed to fracture the ruling class. Think about the social dynamics.
Okay.
The lesser feudal lords, the ones who are maybe just scraping by on a few hundred rupees of passive income, they get a massive 10x payout. If you were a minor lord who lost 500 rupees a year, the government just handed you 5,000 rupees in a lump sum.
To that guy, the government looks incredibly generous. He is thrilled with his windfall. He is taking that money and going home, and he is definitely not joining a rebellion.
Exactly. You have just bought the loyalty, or at least the silence, of the entire lower and middle tier of the aristocracy.
Brilliant.
But the ultra-wealthy, the lords pulling in tens of thousands of rupees who used to rule vast domains, they get stupidly diminishing returns, and they hit that hard 12,000 rupee cap immediately.
So they get wiped out.
The state deliberately stripped the multi-generational power and wealth from the top tier, but because they paid off the lesser lords so handsomely, the ultra-wealthy suddenly found themselves completely isolated.
It is textbook divide and conquer, executed entirely through a spreadsheet. You separate the minor nobility from the mega-rich using math.
Yes.
But wait, there is a massive financial landmine hidden in this whole plan, avoiding land and paying out compensation.
Oh, the mortgages.
Yeah, these Birta lands weren't just dirt, they were the collateral for the whole regional economy.
This is perhaps the most sophisticated macroeconomic insight in the entire act. People took out massive loans against these lands. Mortgages were the lifeblood of credit.
Right.
If the government just instantly voids the land value and transfers it to a tenant, every moneylender, every bank, and every financial institution holding those mortgages instantly loses their collateral. They go completely bankrupt.
It would trigger a complete financial collapse. You solve the feudalism problem, but you destroy the credit market in the process.
So the state included a very specific caveat. If the voided A-class land was mortgaged, the state's compensation money does not go to the Birta owner.
Where does it go?
It goes directly to the mortgage holder, up to the amount of the loan. The former lord only gets whatever is left over after the debt is cleared.
Wow, they prioritized the banks over the nobility.
They had to. The state ensured that the financial lending system was made whole first. They protected the credit market from collapsing as a byproduct of the agrarian reform.
That's so smart.
It proves they weren't just writing angry populist policy, They were managing a complex macroeconomic transition.
It really is an incredible ecosystem of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
When we zoom out and look at the whole picture of what this 1959 document achieved, it's staggering.
It truly is.
You have the instant nullification of centuries of legal precedent. You have the sudden transfer of wealth to the working tenant class, winning their loyalty. You have the meticulous physical grading of soil to create a mathematically sustainable tax base. You bypass the sluggish court system by giving taxmen the power to jail non-compliant elites. And holding the entire powder keg together, you have this brilliant sliding scale of compensation that buys off the middle class, isolates the ultra-rich, and protects the underlying credit markets.
It completely reframes how we think about state power. We often assume that dismantling entrenched inequality requires violent upheaval or generations of slow, incremental change.
Right, like it has to take decades.
But this shows what the raw application of state power looks like when it is wielded with mathematical precision. They literally rewired the entire engine of the national economy while the machine was still running.
And for you listening, I think this is why digging into historical blueprints like this is so relevant to our world today.
Oh, absolutely.
Whenever you scroll through the news, you see these massive, heated debates over wealth taxes or billionaires or how to fix systemic housing inequality. It can often feel like these modern economic systems are just too massive, too legally protected to ever really change.
It feels impossible.
But this deep dive proves that massive structural wealth redistribution is absolutely possible. It doesn't require magic. It requires precise, ruthless legal engineering.
Which leaves us with a fascinating parallel to consider for our own era. This act successfully transformed untouchable feudal lords into regular taxpayers simply by declaring the old paperwork void and writing new rules of ownership.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, in our modern digital age, what untouchable stores of wealth exist today, like vast empires of personal data or untraceable offshore accounts that a government could theoretically abolish tomorrow with just the stroke of a legislative pen.